Hi everyone. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about stage fright. I wanted to share my own experiences and then share things that I've found that have helped and different methods that I've used to sort of overcome and deal with stage fright. So my earliest memories of stage fright start from being in school, from probably primary school or nursery, like literally the earliest years that I can remember. We had to do an assembly every single day where the whole school would get together in the big hall, and basically the oldest students, which was year 8, probably about 12 or 13 years old, would have to read a passage of the Bible. Basically, they took turns in doing it, so every student would have to read one passage eventually once they reached that year. And anyway, I remember looking at all these students having to get up in front of the entire school, read that passage. I remember watching them and being absolutely terrified. I really didn't want my turn to roll around and have to do it myself. I couldn't imagine doing it. I really couldn't comprehend being in front of that many people, and just the thought terrified me. So that's my earliest memory of sort of stage fright. It's all really the same thing: being in front of people, confidence, acting in front of people, whether you're literally acting as an actor or you're just doing something, you know. I pretty much carried that with me for my entire young life, all the way up until actually joining a performing arts school, where I realised I now have to be good at performing. I have no other choice. And I feel like that's where I started having to tackle stage fright head on rather than acting to avoid it. So that probably leads me to my first point. You have to experience the stage to be able to overcome stage fright. It's very easy to go, oh, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at talking in front of people, so I don't do that. You know, and then you're going to carry with you always a fear of talking in front of people because you've told yourself you're not good at it, you've never done it, so you've never allowed yourself the opportunity to get better at it. When I was in the circus school and I was training to be a performer, we had theatre classes where we did clowning, which is pretty much the most brutal way of introducing someone to the stage, especially if they're not familiar with performing. Because we had to do exercises like you get up on stage and you're told to be funny. By stage, I just mean in front of the class, but it still was like 20 people, and you're told to be funny. And if you're not funny, then the teacher will bang a drum, basically. So you can imagine you just stand up, be funny. If you're not funny, he whacks a thing, so it's even more pressure to try and be funny. And I don't know if you've ever tried to be funny when someone tells you to be funny, but it's very difficult, you know. So that was very embarrassing for me. Like, a lot of the times I hated those classes. I often found myself sitting at the back, never volunteering to go up. I really didn't want to do it. And it's only now, in hindsight, that I realise how those classes would have benefited me. You know, if you can go to the extremities of humiliation, like embarrassing yourself, it's not supposed to be that. It's more about letting down your own ego, but it can be perceived as embarrassing or humiliating, or it can be seen as someone just having a good time, not taking themselves too seriously. But obviously it's only in hindsight I can see the various ways that you could look at the classes, what you can actually get from it. At the time, I just hated it and I didn't want to be involved whatsoever. So I think there I realised that the main reason that I'm experiencing stage fright is because I have a fear of being judged, a fear of what people are going to think of me. Is it going to damage my reputation? Am I going to do something that embarrasses me, so then later people think that guy isn't what he thought he was, or isn't what he proclaimed he was? He's actually a fool, you know? He did this thing and it was so embarrassing, and we all laughed. You know, that's sort of the underlying idea of stage fright. In reality, it mostly comes from overthinking. But yeah, I think it's just a general lack of confidence in yourself and your ability, and how that ability or whatever it is that you do is going to be perceived by others. Often we're very overcritical and we sort of expect audiences to be the maximum critiques, We don't ever expect to go to an audience to be like, oh, they'll be okay. Even if I mess up, they'll be on my side. Even though for the most part, most audiences are on your side. You never think that. You just think, oh, they're going to hate me. They're going to boo. They're going to this and that. And it's all just lack of confidence, almost getting into the realms of, well, it's irrational, So back to the point about experience. I think one of the most important things to do is to experience time on stage, different stages, different audiences, different things that you're doing on stage. Just in general, if you can maximize the time that you're having doing the thing that gives you the fear, the stage fright, only that will allow you to, work your way through the process. I think it's important to think of stage fright as an ongoing process. It's not just a problem that you either have or you haven't. It's sort of a skill that needs to be trained and learned separately. And it's the same, I feel, for every element of performer or athlete or anyone. Let's take, for example, a martial artist. It's very different performing one-on-one in a gym to performing on live TV in front of an audience of 100,000 people. It's a different skill. You have to be used to the lights, to the cameras, to the atmosphere, and you have to be used to what it feels like to be watched while you're performing. It adds a huge new element, more pressure, more distractions, more everything. So I think when you frame stage fright and performance as a skill alongside martial arts or juggling or whatever, acting or whatever it is that you do, you know that you have to train to get better at acting, at juggling, at martial arts. You also have to train and practice to get better at being on stage. So when you think of it as a skill and not as like a burden that you have to deal with, that maybe you think others don't have to deal with, which may be true. Some different people experience stage fright differently. The more you reframe it, the better it is, I think, for yourself to process that. My first point is really experience different stages, different shows. Having an audience of 500 people in a theatre can be a completely different experience to a intimate cafe with 50 people or a stadium with 100,000 people. It's not even necessarily, oh, the bigger crowds are more scary. Sometimes it's the smaller crowds that can give you the most fear. And the bigger crowds, you get even depersonalized a little bit because everyone's so far away, you can't make out any faces, things like that. It's interesting how it all works, but in general, you just want to experience as big of a variety of different audiences and different settings and different everything as possible. The more you experience, the more you're going to get used to how to interact with an audience, how they react to different things that you do. You're going to understand the variety of reactions. At some point, you're going to get a terrible audience or a terrible audience member, and that's great. You want to experience what the worst audience possible is like, because then you can appreciate the good audiences and even the average audiences. A lot of the times your worst nightmare on stage can actually be not that bad, like audience booing you or you failing a trick or something. A lot of the times it's so much worse in your head, like thinking about, oh, what if this goes wrong? Or in hindsight, when you're thinking, kind of cringing about it, it's always a lot worse than actually in the moment on stage. That's what I find anyway. So I guess the point there is the more that you have these experiences, the more you're going to understand that, oh, that wasn't so bad. Oh, the fear was maybe I overthought it in my head. It really wasn't as bad as it could have been. And you could say, oh, I dropped my juggling ball today. That's the thing I said I never wanted to happen, but I did it. And actually, I just picked it up and kept going, and no one really cared. Yeah. After experience, I think another point would be think about all the different factors that might be contributing to your nervousness or stage fright, and then really go into depth with the thought, because a lot of us can carry a feeling, or it can even be physical. You can have like, oh, I feel a lump in my chest or something like that, and then you associate this with nervousness, and you know you're going on stage, so you know this is stage fright. This is what stage fright is. But if you go into that feeling, you really think about it, you might be able to identify certain things like, oh, a big reason for this feeling is because I'm putting in a new trick in my act, which I'm not 100% confident about, etc. Or I'm feeling like this because I'm going to this theatre and it's the biggest theatre I've ever been to, most people I've ever performed to, etc. So you can begin to identify specifically the things that you are having nervousness or anxiety about, and then try and control the factors that you can control. If you're worried about messing up a certain trick in your act, then practice that trick 100 times, or remove the trick from your act and put in something that you are more confident with. It's only by really breaking down your feelings that you might be able to find an appropriate course of action to take. You know, if you're worried about getting to the venue late, then ensure you leave half an hour earlier than you were planning to leave. If you're worried about forgetting something, then pack the night before. I know these are obvious things, but if you really go out of the way to think about all the things that you can do to help yourself, it only leaves a couple of things that will be outside of your control. Over time, you might find more and more things that help you. You might find, for example, the perfect lighting setup for your act, and then you can just bring that with you. Obviously not bringing the lights, but you can instruct how to set them up or whatever in the way that you know helps you the most and that you're familiar with, etc. You know, the more experience you have, the more things you'll be able to identify that will help you, etc. But it's worth dwelling in the feeling of anxiety just to uncover what could be causing it, or what are a couple of things that might be contributing towards it. I guess in terms of eating and drinking and nutrition and stuff, there are loads of different herbs and supplements and other things that can help or cause anxiety. Things that I personally have found to help, there are obviously loads that I'm not going to talk about. Don't drink too much coffee. I don't drink too much coffee before I go on stage. A lot of the times I trick myself and I think, oh, I'm getting tired. I need something to wake me up, to focus. But at the end of the day, caffeine can cause you to be more nervous, basically. One supplement that you can have is an amino acid called L-theanine. And this is something that takes away or reduces some of these nervous side effects and jitters from caffeine. I found it actually works, so maybe worth trying. I've also found CBD to be quite effective. Obviously with these things, it can be a bit of a placebo, like potentially. It's very hard to tell sometimes, but I have found that works a bit in reducing my own feelings of stress, etc. One of the biggest things for me nutritionally is just Obviously, make sure that I'm sustained before I do a show. Like, obviously, you don't want to do anything when you're starving, but I don't like to eat really before I go on stage. Even 5 hours or so before, I wouldn't have a big meal. In an ideal world, I would just have snacks before a show and I would eat after the show. If the show's really late, you have to eat some things, but I really, A, don't have anything big. B, don't have anything that I don't know exactly how my body is going to react and deal with. So you don't want to have like a huge meal that you don't usually eat, because you don't know how it's going to digest. You don't know how you're going to feel when you do exercise with that meal. There's no real reason why you can't completely replicate your performance day diet and meals on a day where you don't do the show, and then you do exercise at the time of the show, so you know exactly how you're going to feel in your stomach, etc., while you're doing exercise with that food. So there's no surprises on the show day. One of the classic things that a lot of performers talk about is going to the toilet before you go on stage. You know, it's a classic phobia. No one wants to have an accident on stage. And yeah, you can control, obviously it's very rare for you to have an accident on stage, but you can control any fears you may have about that in a slightly better way, at least by not surprising yourself with meals and having something sensible. Final sort of tip for stage fright. I have read throughout my performing career, and even before that, I've read so many books, sort of self-help style books on confidence building, how to maximize and enhance your performance and your mentality. And I really think a lot of these things help. Of course, different books can help different people. Different people or different sorts of advice suit more people better. And a lot of the times you just need to find one that you sort of identify with, or that suits the way that you think or act, and it can really help. But anyway, I have 2 books that I would recommend. First one is called With Winning in Mind, and this is all about how to perform at your peak, about a guy who's sort of average bloke, and then he became an Olympic champion, and he did so by trying all these different methods and finding the ultimate way to prime his mind to performing under pressure, etc. Very interesting, very relevant for stage. And the second one is called The Chimp Paradox, and that's all about the way that you think and the way that essentially your thoughts work, with the inner chimp being the part of your brain that says, oh, don't bother going to the gym today, you can just sit on the sofa. Or the part of your brain that maybe says, oh, you don't want to go on stage because something really bad is going to happen. And then, well, the whole book is just about how to deal with these thoughts, deal with this inner chimp, and it's very relevant. Really good book, definitely recommend it. So, to summarize, I apologize if that was a bit of a rant. The first biggest way, I think, to get over stage fright is to first reframe the issue. Don't think, I have a condition, it's stage fright, and I need to eliminate it. You think, I am dealing with stage fright, I need to treat this like a process and understand it's going to take time, and I'm happy with that, I accept that, and I know that it's the same sort of process as I went through when I learned to juggle, I learned to run, I learned to do any skill. You know, it takes time, you've got to just accept it. It's a journey, not a single step. Best way to get through that is experiencing as many different things, performances, shows as possible that put you through this feeling in different contexts. Also, to dive into the feeling, so you really identify what could be causing you to have stage fright. Once you've done that, you can go through each of those reasons and see which of them you can deal with, which of them you can help, which of them you might have a solution for to reduce the overall feelings of stage fright. Don't neglect the importance of a good diet. A lot of your feelings and stuff are linked to your gut, and bacteria's in your gut. So, be healthy. Try a couple of different herbs or different things that you think might help for anxiety. In my opinion, it's worth trying things because you never know what might work for you. Obviously, I'm not saying to do some crazy drugs, but just over the counter, like healthy foods that you may not have in your diet might help. And finally, look for advice and for help from, professionals, people that deal with performance problems or enhancing your performance. Look at the books that deal with psychology. It's all very relevant. I think if you're ignoring all of that part of things, then you're really ignoring a huge area that has been properly studied by professionals. There definitely are people that have dealt with what you're dealing with, and it's worth looking around and finding things that might help. Even if one book has one sentence that helps you, that's still a sentence that that you didn't have before. A little bit of help that might help you a little bit. I'm all about 1%, getting 1% better, even 0.1% better. If something can help me get that much better or improve that much at anything I'm trying to do, then why not do it? Anyway, thank you very much for watching this whole video. If you made it this far, let me know what you think in the comments. Leave me a like if you did like it. Would love to know your own experiences of stage fright. How have you sort of dealt with your experience? What's your story, etc. For me, now, I feel like I don't have stage fright at all how I used to. I was before a show 10 years ago, I was sitting for hours just completely nervous, wasn't able to enjoy myself, have a conversation, have fun. And now it's sort of whatever. I don't really have it in the same way. Obviously, there's still some nerves, some adrenaline, but the way that I process it is not debilitating or anything like that anymore. So I know for a fact it's possible to go from having it to not having it, or having it in a very manageable way. Anyway, maybe this helps someone. Hope so. Thanks for watching again, and see you guys tomorrow.
Yeah.